Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. I have a bad feeling that I think this EV tax credit is actually going to go through. Even if it has been altered somewhat from the latest, it's starting to feel inevitable that it will occur. Really, even if it costs $50 billion a year, I think it will still go ahead. A too big to fail campaign that if US auto goes under, then transport as we know it will end, or too many workers will lose their jobs, etc. In Japan, these are known as zombie corporations. In fact, I thought this was nonsense and somewhat dismissed it, and thought perhaps it might have just lasted a year or two until Congress actually calculates this is costing an absolute fortune every year, and they end it. But perhaps I was being naive. Perhaps the cronyism goes that deep. I mean, we saw how much a good payout can really get these days with the GFC, not to mention the savings and loans bailout in the 80s. The government just don't seem to care. So perhaps we should wisen up a little here. We're possibly being naive. Legacy don't want to make electric. They just want to make profit. In fact, they don't want to make electric, period. Legacy need a one-up over Tesla. But they can't do it in Tesla's arena, as they're dying in the BEV industry. They don't have the demand, supply, or profit, which are three very important elements when in business. So instead, Legacy are moving it back to their home turf. Rather than trying to make fully electric cars, Legacy are going to cheat and keep making ICE, except with one tiny little caveat, a minimum of a 7 kilowatt-hour battery. Aside from that, everything else is the same, and it's business as usual. And in fact, the manufacturing process is also very similar, something that they can actually achieve, and likely even to volume production. And that is what is now being pushed in the bill. Just a 7 kilowatt-hour battery required to receive a $7,500 credit, along with other various caveats that eliminate the Chinese competition and potentially some of the European, whilst also doing what they can to make sure Tesla reap as little of the benefit as possible. Legacy are bringing the game back in their own court. In fact, I love a quote from JP Morgan. A man always has two reasons for doing anything, a good reason and the real reason. From the outside, it might appear that the government are trying to convert domestic vehicles to be better for the environment and our health. That is the good reason and how they sell it. But behind the scenes, the real reason is just for Legacy to have a chance against the industry disruptor. And even if they fall, well, they will have a massive cash pile of profit to land on. Politicians start with the real reason first and then try and find all the good reasons as to how they can sell it to the people. But hybrids? And all hybrids, not just plug-ins. Wow, didn't think they'd go that low. And a $7,500 credit. That is huge. I think in the previous bill it was less than half that for hybrids at $3,500. This would perhaps cost an addition of a minimum of $2,500 cost per vehicle. So the cost of an ICE car was previously $30,000, for example, then the new cost would be $32,500 if 100% of the cost was passed on to the consumer. Except now the consumer can get $7,500 off the car, so it now becomes $25,000, and the consumer gets a more efficient hybrid car over a pure ICE car, so they also get to save money on fuel. That's a win for the consumer. But a $25,000 hybrid, well, that's going to be popular. In fact, everyone's going to want to get their EV discount, as they are all indirectly paying for it due to less government income. End result, too much demand. However, Legacy autos can be sold at the market clearing price, or even higher, depending on how good the salesman is. If they have everyone wanting their cars, then they'll simply charge more for them, and we're not talking about a few thousand, but sometimes significantly higher. However, it wasn't the car dealers that have been paying millions in cronyism, so why should they get to benefit? It's Legacy Autos, and Legacy Autos are the ones who want a payday here. Therefore, they're going to raise the prices of their vehicles. And these vehicles, unlike their fully electric ones, well, they may actually even carry a profit. Therefore, every dollar they raise the price at this stage will be felt all the way in the operating profits. Therefore, Legacy are obviously going to raise the prices and absorb their supposed discount for the consumer as more profit for themselves. Even just a $3,000 price rise would mean a massive amount of profit, depending on how many hybrids they can actually produce. And just think of all the accompanying advertising campaigns when Legacy can actually produce a decent profit on a sale of a car. And then any extra money Legacy leave on the table will be absorbed by the dealerships, resulting in what is likely very little actual discount for the end user. Yet the overall intention is to allow affordable EVs for the masses, because EVs are just getting too expensive. But as we're discovering with Tesla, demand is only any good if it can actually be catered to, as in if there is a supply. Well, we know Legacy can make ICE vehicles, although their supply has actually been a little short lately, supposedly to do with semiconductors. I'm not sure if that is a temporary issue or not, but few semiconductor companies want to actually supply Legacy with their basic small profit chips. Their technology is so antiquated, Legacy haven't kept up and use old chips which are dying out. Anyway, that may be rectified. I'm not in the chip industry. But what else goes into hybrids? Well, they still use batteries. And what is the number one constraint with EV growth? Battery supply. Now, it might be different if 10% of your models are hybrid, but if you're pushing to 50% or more, then that is going to be a reasonable amount of batteries you might want. If, for example, GM sold 1 million hybrids a year with 7 kilowatt-hour batteries, then that comes to 7 gigawatt-hours of cells. Alright, that probably is reasonably doable. But what if these new factories Legacy are building are actually earmarked for hybrids? The battery and cell factories could end up making batteries for just hybrids. I mean, that's a little scary to even consider, right? It's going to come down to the consumer level. Despite all this cronyism or flat-out socialism, it's still a free market economy. There's a democracy on what products you want to see. We vote for all our items we want businesses to produce for us. We vote with our dollars. If there's something we don't like, we don't vote for it. Or buy, as some people call it. Instead, we buy the competition. Will consumers be smart enough to realize the benefits of fully electric over hybrid, despite the massive advertising campaigns telling them otherwise? At the end of the day, Legacy still has to convince their customers hybrid is the future. And remember though, the BEV competition also have $7,500 off, of which I mean partly the Model Y, which will quickly become the best-selling vehicle in the US, probably by 2024. I repeat, there is potentially a $52,500 Model Y available to American consumers, with features that, still not entirely sure about everything it has just yet, but at $52,500, I know something it will have: a really long waiting list. So inevitably, the price of that might even recede all the way back to $60,000. In other words, Tesla might eat the entire credit themselves as profit. Why? Because the waiting list is already longer than they want. Long waiting lists make forecasting difficult that far out, and especially with such a volatile economy. Imagine if some hyperinflation kicked in and Tesla had to honor these low prices. Oh, you understand why Tesla bought Bitcoin now? A hedge against hyperinflation? And don't feel too bad about the consumer getting ripped off out of their tax credit. There never was a consumer tax credit. It was for Legacy autos all along. And besides, the Legacy dealerships are going to eat up everything Legacy OEM leaves on the table anyway. And of course, Tesla could end up selling something like 5 million vehicles in the US alone. Maybe sometime around 2025. Maybe more vehicles by then. If Tesla can get their production up, then Tesla's prices might actually drop. And maybe there could be a version of the Model Y starting below $50,000 after the credit. Even with Legacy trying to offer an equivalent plug-in hybrid with 50 miles of range, probably going to be about $40,000 still. For 25% more money, it's a big upgrade to the Tesla. But not all these Legacy vehicles are going to have this minimal 7 kilowatt-hour hybrid battery version. Some may have 20 kilowatt-hours. The Chevrolet Volt, Volt with a V, not Bolt with a B, was a GM plug-in hybrid that had 18 kilowatt-hours and over 50 miles of range on battery. They canned it though. I would say that there may be all sorts of hybrids with different utility. For example, GM might make a Camaro that uses the electric motor to add to torque and power to get more performance. The real question this comes down to, as far as Legacy are concerned, for them to have a chance here, is how well can they convince their customers to buy hybrid? I think this tax credit is coming. It will be interesting to see how it plays out. The economics behind it are massive. I would much rather be reporting on Tesla, but unfortunately, it looks like they're going to put this on my lap too. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.